Hello everybody, Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan Living Life with Purity. And today I want to tell you about a little story that began about 15 years ago on the property here in Rome City when I was out doing some maintenance along with one of my younger workers, and we were out mowing the soccer fields that evening, and it was a long stretch of soccer fields to mow that night, and I took off with one of the mowers, and our mowers had 6-foot wide decks on them, what we call a zero-turn mower. You see them everywhere these days, but they were newer at that time. And it had twin saddle tanks on the back of it, so each tank held 5 gallons of gasoline. And that could usually keep you going for the better part of an 8-hour shift. Well, I kind of broke one of the cardinal rules I'd always told my guys to make sure that they always had the tanks topped off when they go out to mow. And I did the dumbest thing, and I assumed that the tanks had already been filled up when I hopped on and took off to go do the mowing. Well, I was half right. One of the tanks was filled, and I was using it and not realizing that the other one was empty. Well, one thing led to another, and I ended up about a third of a mile away from the barns and the building where we keep all our maintenance items, that being the gasoline and everything I needed. And when I got out about a third of a mile away from the property mowing one of the far soccer fields, I ran out of gas. And I thought, well, easy enough, I'll just switch over to the other tank. Well, there was nothing in that tank. So there I am, I'm stuck about a third of a mile away from the buildings and no radios or any way to get a hold of anybody. So I had a hike on my hands. So I had to walk all the way back across the fields to the barn areas. And then when I got there, I needed to find somebody that could help give me a tow back in from the fields out there, because I didn't have smaller fuel tanks to take a backup supply out there. So everything was working against me that day. But anyway, I found one of my young guys who was there, and this was a guy who had been having something going on in his life. There was a lot of stress that was happening to him. There was a lot of things that were happening with his parents. There was a lot of things that was happening with his relationship with his girlfriend. There was a lot of things happening with him finishing up his graduation in high school. He was just feeling a lot of stress for an 18-year-old young man. And he had been talking with me off and on for several weeks going on, and he kept asking me, you know, Larry, what am I feeling here? Why do I feel different when I'm here? And I looked at him, I said, well, what do you mean? How do you feel different? And he says, well, this place has something about it. He says, what am I feeling? What's going on here? And I just sort of smiled inside and listened to him tell me his story and what was going on with him. And I tried to answer back. I said, this place is an alleged apparition site of the Virgin Mary. I said, it's quite possible that in your feelings, what you're feeling is a calling to you by the Holy Spirit or even Mary directly to listen to her and follow and learn to know who her son really is. And he says, oh, Jesus, yeah, I know that. I've went to school, we learned all about that, in Nazareth and all that stuff. But he didn't really have the fullness. He had the story, but he didn't have the fullness of it and the implications of what the Holy Family was truly about and what their influence could be upon you. And so I kind of baby steps with this kid because he wasn't a churchgoer. His family didn't have a relationship with a church of any kind. But he was feeling something. And so I wanted to kind of let this grow on its own. I didn't want to move him anyway. I wanted to see what he came up with from a natural response. Well, he didn't really know what to think. Hey, settle down. That's JJ here doing the shakeout here, so go to sleep. And so this young man and I found him, and I said, hey, I need you to tow me back in from out in the field. Let's take the tractor out there, and you can tow me back in, and I get this thing refueled. And he said, okay. So we hopped on the tractor, drove out there, and he said, well, let me just check the tanks. So we checked the tanks again. Both of them were completely empty. There wasn't a spit in there to get these things started again. And so he told me, and one person had to drive the machine, otherwise it would go cattywampus. It'd go all over the place if you just tried to tow it. So I had to be on there to drive it and steer it while he was towing me in. So we did this process, towed the mower back into the barns. And when we got there to the gas pumps were shut off as how I normally did so that no one would steal the fuel. And the switch to turn them back on was inside the barn itself. So you had to go into the building, turn on the switch, come back out around the building, fuel yourself up, then go back in and turn the switch off inside again to cut the power off. Well, as I'm waiting outside for him to go in and turn the switch on, I got off and was getting ready to fill the tanks. And he was coming back around the corner, and I was pulling the lid off the first tank, and to my surprise, it was completely full. I mean, it wasn't just full, it was full all the way to the top. And I looked at him and he looked at me and I said, what the heck? And I said, these things were empty. And he goes, yeah, I know. He says, what did you do? How'd you fill it up so fast? I said, I didn't. I said, you just turned the machine on, or the pump's on. And he goes, no. I said, yeah. So we checked the other tank. It was full too, all the way to the top. And we're both just looking at each other, and he's saying, how did you do that? I said, I didn't do anything. And he's just looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I said, is it gas? And so he put his finger in it and said, yeah, it was gas. And it was just one of these things. And I asked him, I said, what do you think happened? He just looked at me and says, you're the one asking me? I said, yeah, I'm asking you. What do you think happened? He just thought for a second, and he says, I think this is a miracle. I think that somebody's wanting you to have gas and wants to maybe show us that they're real. I thought about that. I said, I think you're right. I don't think this is for me so much. I think this is for you. What do you think? And he says, well, I told you, I think that somebody wants us to know that they're real. I said, yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I said, what are we going to do about this? He goes, oh, I don't know. He says, I don't think anyone would believe it. I said, well, let me do something. So I took my phone out, and I called a fellow by the name of Irv Kloska. And Irv Kloska has a healing ministry, and he'd been a part of the program there in Rome City for many years, and I had a lot of trust in him. He knew a lot of things about miraculous things that have happened over the course of the centuries, and he studies all this stuff. And I said, hey, Irv, I said, why don't you bring that big truck of yours down here? We'll fill it up with gas today. They're giving away 10 gallons of gas to every customer. And he goes, what are you talking about? I told him the story about the mower, and he just started laughing. Irv has this big roaring laughter. And I had him on speakerphone, and the two of us were listening to him. I said, no. I said, what do you think? Have you ever heard of anything like this before? He says, no, absolutely not. Gas. And I said, and the mower fires right up. So, something's going on here. And I said, I can't really explain it. And except that maybe we were to be shown some sort of miracle in our lives, and that miracles don't have to be so incredible. They could be simple little things like, 10 gallons of free gas that you weren't expecting. Now, the two of us are there, and we just can't explain this at all, because there was just no way that I could have done this while he was taking the 20 seconds to move in and out of the barn to turn the switch on. And, I hadn't even gotten off the machine. So what happened there? We don't know. To this day, it's still a mystery. Well, it got a little complicated last night, because I went out to the store, and I was looking to buy some things for the house, and I needed honey. Was on my list of things. And I got to the store, and I saw the price of the honey in the stores. I thought, no, I said, that's way too much. We're in season right now. And I used to keep bees on the property. And I taught this young man who was with me on the free gas day. I had taught him about beekeeping and the basics of it because he showed an active interest in it. And so I wanted to show him how to go about handling bees and how to take care of yourself by just relaxing and not getting excited. Don't swat at the bees ever. If you're around bees or anything like that, just settle down, pretend that you're a tree, and don't react to them at all. They may set on you, they may crawl around a little bit, but they won't sting you if you don't show any kind of reaction. They're going to react off of your energy. And so if you're swatting at them, they will defend themselves. So my suggestion is around bees, just keep your hands down by your side, pretend that you're a tree, and they'll leave you alone. And I'm not saying I never got stung. I got it, every now and then I'd get something because they were a little honked off at me because I was messing with their home. But I was taking the honey, extracting it out, and what I would do with honey is I wouldn't filter it when it was done. And this you can see, maybe you can see, is a little bit on the cloudy side. This is real tasty honey. Now, when I was coming back home from the grocery store, without my honey, because it was too much, I was going to find somebody with a local farm stand that had some. And as I was driving home on a back road, I saw a sign that said, "Honey for sale. We have honey." And so I doubled back around, went up in there just to see what they had. And there was a young woman there, early 30s, pretty gal. And I said, "Hey," I said, "I see you got a sign for honey." I said, "What's the story? What do you got? What's it cost?" And she says, "Well, we're asking $15 a quart." She says, "Is that too much?" And I said, "No." I said, "That seems really fair." I said, "Can I see it? Can I taste it?" And she said, "Sure." She said, "We have a paddle right here. You can taste some." And so I did, and it was very, very good. And I said, "Well, who's the beekeeper in the family? Or is it you?" She says, "No, that's my husband." And I said, "Wow." I said, "He's kind of a young guy to be doing honey." I said, "He's about your age?" She goes, "Yeah." She says, "We've been together since high school." And I said, "Oh, that's really cool." I said, "How does he go about it? Does he filter it?" And she goes, "No, he doesn't filter it. He was taught not to filter it by the guy that taught him to do it, years ago." I said, "Oh, really?" So that's good. Most people will filter it because they think that clarity is really what you want, but a little bit of cloudiness is really where the flavor is. And so anyway, we're going through our discussion about honey and things like this, and she had 2 quarts out there, and I had $100 bill, and she didn't have a lot of change. And I said, "Well, can I get 6 quarts? That'd be $90, and you just have to give me back 10. And she goes, "Yeah, I've got to get a hold of my husband. He has to bring some more up." And I said, "Okay, could that be done now?" And he says, "Yeah, I'll get him on his way." So she called him, and he comes around with another bin of quart jars of honey. And he comes around the corner, and we both kind of stare at each other a little bit. And he's trying to figure. It's one of those things where somebody looks familiar, but they're out of place. So it's not in the circumstance. So you wonder, this person looks familiar, but I don't know why. Well, we both sort of studied each other and started talking about beekeeping and things like that. And he told me about the guy that taught him. And I said, "Well, you learned well, young man." And I said his name. And he just looked at me and he says, "Oh, my God, it's you." And I said, "Yeah, it's me. And proud of you." He said, "You kept the art up." He says, "Oh, yeah." He says, "I love beekeeping now." He says, "You taught me everything about beekeeping," he said. But I think he's learned a bit more because this is really, really tasty honey. Well, anyway, I'm sitting there talking with he and his wife, about beekeeping and things like that. And then the conversation kind of waned a little bit, got a little bit uncomfortable, this quiet pause. I just looked at him, and he looked back at me and said, "Have you ever told anybody?" And he goes, "Yeah, I was just telling her, the other week." And I turned to her and I said, "What was he telling you?" She says, "Well, he was telling me about this time they got gas for free that filled up the tanks when they didn't do anything. It was a miracle." And she says, "That was you?" And I said, "Yeah, I was there with him at that time." And she says, "So he's not lying?" I said, "No, he's not lying." And I said, "What do you guys think about that?" And he really didn't know because he was kind of embarrassed about the whole thing because he really didn't know how to take it all in. And I said, did it make a change in your life? Did it affect you at all? And he says, oh, yeah. He says, I think about it all the time, that, miracles do happen and these things are real. And there's nothing you can really do about it, that, when God decides to do something, it happens. And I said, yeah, I think you're right. I said, but I think they wanted you to form yourself to be in tune with that because you were so interested in the girl you were dating. He says, well, that's the girl I married. We just kind of laughed about it a little bit. And I said, well, I think you both made good choices. So, but anyway, we always called that Free Gas Wednesday. And this young man reminded me that it was actually 15 years ago this week that happened. Right at 15, was it 15 or 16 years ago. And, but he was just so amazed by the whole thing. And it was, and I was too. And this is just one of those things you just can't really talk about too much. But I think it's important to sort of share these things with you folks, that just out of the involvement of going for a little bit of a taste of honey that was upon me to get honey, that I got put back in the same place with this young man to rediscover what happened to us years ago and reconfirm that we weren't imagining it, that it really did happen, and that God can create miracles big and small depending on the situation and the need. And this is another example where I think where people need to know that God doesn't always give you what you want. He'll always give you what you need. And that's, if you keep thinking about that and keep that in your mental thought stream and all like that, you will find yourself moving more into a life of living in purity and bringing the divine indwelling into here, because you're thinking about God and the possibilities, and your intention that Jesus, Mary, Joseph, God himself can help deliver these things. God can certainly do it. Jesus can certainly do it. The other two can help get it there. So think about these things. Move confidently throughout your day. And remember, it's not always what you want, but it's what you need that God's going to give you. And right then at that time, I thought I wanted honey, but God said I needed something else. And that was a reconfirmation with this young man, because now I know that day was a turning point, not only in his life, but it was another confirmation in mine. That I'd already had many miraculous things I'd seen, but this one was one that really can't be explained any other way. And it was wonderful to have such a young and thoughtful and ready witness in this young man. And I'm hoping that with last night's meeting again after all these years, that maybe something will turn in both of them and they'll start seeking out a good church for them to belong to. And I told them, I said, if you don't belong to a church, I said, there's plenty in town. Go find one that you enjoy the company of the people that go there, and you find yourself in, agreement with them. I said, that's the first start. Find out who the people are. That's the fruits. So anyway, wonderful things happen all around. I just wanted to throw this one out there for a quick shout out to my old friends and to people out there to know that, hey, God works. So in the meantime, I love you, and I'll be back.